today is important because today we are teeing up Father's Day. And Pastor Zach is going to be preaching next Sunday, and we're going to be using Forrest Gump quite a bit. So when you come in next Sunday, it might be, the theme might be very represented with Bubba Gump shrimp decor and Run Forrest Run. And by the end of today's sermon, you guys will see where we're going, or where Pastor Zach is taking next week. And so when we write our sermons, we get together and we're like, hey, you know, what do you feel like the Lord is talking about? What's on your heart? And then we'll kind of put our ideas together, and then we flush out the main points. And then when we rotate on Sunday mornings, then each of us kind of like, okay, what the Lord's speaking specifically to you about this topic. But it always amazes me how it all just kind of seamlessly flows together. So, the title of today's sermon is Lost and Found. It's on Luke chapter 15. And that's what we've been, breaking apart in the month of June, is the way of the Son, breaking apart the book of Luke. So, let me give you guys a story. A man in his 40s, successful by every outside measure, good career, family, house, the whole picture disappeared. Not physically. He was still showing up for work, still sitting at the dinner table, but somewhere along the way, something in him had gone completely dark. And one morning, his wife woke up and realized that the person lying next to her had been gone for a long time. She just didn't have a name for it. And what stuck with me, because we've all known people like that. Zach and I have gone through phases in our relationship like that, where we're at home together, we live together, we raise kids together, but there's something missing. And it wasn't like a dramatic decrease. It was quiet. It was the fact that you can be completely lost and still be sitting in your own house. You can be surrounded by people who love you and still feel totally alone. You can be so far from yourself, from the person God made you to be, that distance isn't measurable in miles. It's measurable in something harder to name. We talk about being lost as in runaway people, prodigals, like a lost person that lives under a bridge, blowing up their life in some spectacular way. We've all had moments of self-destruction. So, let's get into Luke chapter 15. Now, Jesus in Luke chapter 15 is talking about parables. He's giving them some stories. But context of these stories is what is really, really important. So, in Luke chapter 15, verses 1 and 2, it says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathered around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" They were complaining about Jesus. So here we got two groups. We've got the tax collectors and the sinners. Tax collectors and sinners are people that nobody wanted to deal with. They were the outcasts. We all know tax collectors were people that nobody liked because they could be a little shady. They could do some under-the-table things. They were excommunicated from the synagogue. They couldn't testify in court, and they were considered ceremonially unclean. They were the below moral in the economy of the Jewish culture. They had cashed out all of their dignity. We've all had moments of feeling like we've cashed out our dignity, right? Then you've got group two, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law. They were the gatekeepers. They are people who had dictated their lives to holiness, to Scripture, to keeping Israel pure for the coming of God. In their framework, holiness meant separation. You didn't eat with unclean people. You didn't associate with sinners. And association implied endorsement. An endorsement implied contamination. They were muttering. Now, the word muttering only appears 2 times in the New Testament. Both times in Luke. Both times Pharisees complaining about Jesus eating with the wrong people. And Jesus was using that term as a way to draw a line all the way back to the New Testament. Because in the New Testament, the Israelites were complaining in the wilderness against God. The word carries weight because the word muttering is used in context of going astray in their hearts. And the Pharisees were not angry at the sinners. They were angry at Jesus because Jesus was eating with them. Now, in Jewish culture, when you ate with somebody, it means that that was a public declaration of who you were identified with. So if you invited somebody into your home and you ate with them, you were saying, hey, I'm friends with them, and I condone the lifestyle that they live. Think about that for a second. And Jesus was hanging out with them. Jesus hears the muttering, and instead of defending himself or explaining himself, he does what he always does. And that's where he starts telling stories. And that's where we pick up in verse 3. Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Does he not leave the 99 in open country and go after the one lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. And then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep. The story seems really simple. Of course, the shepherd goes after his lost sheep. If I had a dog that was missing at home, then I'm going to do everything I can to go after and find it, right? Our dogs are important. The shepherds, though, in this story were not a romantic figure. You know, when we talk about shepherds, we all think about Jesus' birth, right? Shepherds came and declared the glory of God with the angels singing. Shepherds were considered untrustworthy in the Jewish time that Jesus is sharing this story. Think about that. Jesus is using an untrustworthy figure. Shepherds were perpetually working outdoors, which meant that they could not observe ritual purity laws. They were excluded from the synagogue, not unlike the tax collectors and sinners that we had met in verse 1. So Jesus is using the shepherds. So when Jesus says, suppose one of you has 100 sheep, he's speaking directly to the Pharisees. And he's asking them to inhabit the perspective of someone they would consider beneath them. Because shepherds, living outside, watching sheep, were considered less than. That's Jesus' first jab. Don't you like it when people have drop the mic moments without saying a whole lot? You know, Zach and I, he's got a running list on his phone. When we watch movies and stuff like that, we'll be like, ooh, that line would preach. That's a good statement. And he's got a running list on his phone, on his notes app, of all of the good movie lines. But that was Jesus taking a drop the mic moment. Jesus saying, put yourself in the shoes of the kind of person you've been sneering at. A shepherd, a sinner. Now, realize that one sheep out of 100 is 1%. Now, being in business world, if you did a cost analysis, I would be okay with leaving that 1%. Like, okay, So working in the heavy equipment world, if I was helping a deal along, and let's say the customer was buying a $500,000 piece of equipment, and I'm working on their financing and working on getting all the I's dotted and T's crossed, and something comes up and says, hey, they need a $1,000 down payment, which this is a real world scenario I've had. They need a $1,000 down payment on this deal. Do you think that I'm going to go back to that customer and say, hey, I need $1,000. And if they tell me, no, I don't have $1,000 in cash, do you think I'm going to let that deal walk? No, I'm not going to let them walk out the door. I'm going to say, you know what? No problem. We'll pay your $1,000 down payment for you. Because $1,000 compared to $500,000 is what? Not a whole lot of money in the grand scheme of things, right? So for a shepherd to be willing to risk his 99% to go after one is a big deal. And the shepherd takes on the mentality of there is no plan B. I'll look for a reasonable amount of time. The shepherd is saying, no, I'm going to search until I find my sheep. Persistent action. The shepherd continues until the sheep is found. He is searching until, and that is God's character on display, because God does not stop searching for you. And in verse 5, when he finds the sheep, he doesn't scold it, he doesn't drag it home by its leg. He picks it up, puts it on his shoulder, and starts walking. You guys ever wondered why the shepherd put the sheep on its shoulder? The sheep that became separated from the flock is exhausted and wandering. Often develop a condition where their legs lock up from fear or exhaustion. They literally cannot walk. A shepherd who finds a sheep in this condition has two options: kill it on the spot or carry it home. That's an example of not just tenderness, but of rescue. Think about that when it applies to you in your relationship with Christ. You know, the shepherds would oftentimes band the sheep's legs together and carry it on their shoulders, not only until it felt ready to walk, but until it learned the sound of the shepherd's voice. Verse 7, I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who do not need to repent. Heaven rejoices more over one than over 99. Sit with that for a minute, because it violates everything we know, how we reward work. Most people want to reward the consistent performers. And you don't get a party. Number 2, the lost coin, verses 8 and 9. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Does she not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin. Now this is a deliberate parallel to the first. 1 out of 100, and now we're up to 10%, because we've got 1 out of 10. The proportion is increasing. The intimacy of relationship is increasing. A shepherd is responsible for a flock, but this woman is in her own home dealing with something that belongs to her personally. And let me give you a little historical context here. Most scholars believe that these 10 silver coins each were worth roughly a day's wage. It was the woman's dowry. It was her identity, her security, her status, and in many cases, her only economic protection in the event of widowhood or divorce. They were often worn as a headdress or a necklace. Losing one wasn't just losing money, it was losing a piece of who you were. So she is adamant, I'm going to light a lamp, I'm going to sweep the house. She searches carefully, with diligence, with attentiveness. It's not just a casual look around. Okay, so I live in a house, right, with a whole bunch of boys. And even Natalie will do this to me sometimes. Mama, where's the remote? Well, where do you think the remote is? Well, in the living room. Okay, we'll go in the living room and find it. 5 minutes later, they're coming back. I can't find it anywhere. And I walk into the living room, and there the remote is, laying right next to the TV where it's supposed to be. That is not careful searching. That's not careful attentiveness. But this woman, she is not having a casual look around the room and see what I can find. She is on her hands and knees in the dark, running a lamp into every corner, refusing to stop until she finds what she's looking for. The coin didn't do anything wrong. The sheep wandered by choice, even if it was an unconscious one. But the coin just fell. The coin was lost through no fault of its own. There's a whole category of people that the first parable doesn't quite reach because they didn't run from God. They didn't leave. Didn't make a dramatic choice to walk away. Didn't blow up their face in some moment of rebellion. They just got lost in the shuffle of life. And I have had moments of that in my own life. Getting lost. Sunday mornings, survival mode. A divorce happened and you stopped being able to sit in church without feeling like everyone knew all your business. The depression moved in and made getting out of bed feel like running a marathon. Being hurt by church and walking away. Nobody lost the coin, it just ended up on the floor. But the woman, she lights a lamp and sweeps the whole house anyway. She doesn't say, well, the coin chose to fall, or the coin should have been more careful. She searches, she finds, she celebrates. You know, when I was reading this through, I was like, why, if she's living in a house that has windows, why would she need a lamp? If it's daylight outside, she should be able to see. So I got looking up the historical part of this. Peasant homes in the first century had few or no windows at all. Even in the middle of the day, inside the home was dark. The coin was in the house the whole time, but it couldn't be seen without light. So think about this theologically. Some of us are not lost somewhere out in the world. We are lost in the dark inside our own house, 1 foot from where we started. We're not far from God in distance, but we are far from God in light. Think about that. How many times have you just felt like you've just fallen through the cracks? God's like, hey, I'm here. Just light me up. Psalms 139, 7 and 8 says, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. Because there is no darkness deep enough. No corner of your interior life remote enough. No hidden room in your soul that a lamp cannot reach. So here we have two parables increasing intimacy. Both ended in the same way. Celebration, party is thrown. 1 sheep out of 100, a party. 1 coin out of a 10, a party. But this is where we're going to live at. Jesus tells the third story. It's a son, a father, a brother. They can speak, they can reason, they can choose. And this third parable carries a weight that the other two don't. Because here, that lost son knew he was leaving. He's like, peace out. Sayonara. I got better things to do. And depending on where you're at in your life, you will fit into the category of one of those three people. The son, the brother, or the father. And Zach's going to be diving into the father next Sunday. So we're going to live with the two brothers right now. So in verse 11, Jesus continued, there was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Now, Jesus' audience, with the tax collectors and the sinners and the Pharisees, would have gasped. They would have been like, ah. They would have had a, oh, crap moment. Because in Jewish law and custom, a son could theoretically inherit property before the father's death in limited circumstances. But asking for it was virtually unheard of as an assertion of the son's will. A son does not inherit while the father is alive except as though the father were dead. What the son is saying in effect is, I want what you have, but I do not want you. Think about that for a minute. When I was researching and studying this out, that was huge to me. The prodigal son wasn't just saying, hey, I want what you have. He was saying, Father, you are now going to be dead to me. I want the gift, but I do not want the giver. It's not just financially aggressive. He was saying, you are socially dead to me. I have no father anymore. Think about that. In that culture, the father could have had every right to beat his son, disown him, have him brought before the village elders. Instead, he just says, okay. He divides his estate, and he lets him go. The father lets him go. How many people in your life have wronged you, but you couldn't let them go? Verse 13, not long after that, this younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. Now, in the Greek, in the Jewish history, when it says distant country, it carries more than just geography. Meaning that when they say a distant country, they were going to a Gentile land. So they're saying that you are leaving behind everything that made you who you are, your family, your community, your covenant identity, and you are purposefully leaving behind God. They're saying it's a spiritual condition. And he squanders it all. He scattered it. He threw it around, dispersed it like seed tossed in all directions. It wasn't just careless spending. This is an image of a person who took something precious and made nothing of it. You know, Pastor Zach and I took Natalie and Luke yesterday to see a movie called The Breadwinner. It was a great movie, good family movie. But we had prepared them ahead of time. I had cooked lunch. We sat down and ate lunch. And while we were eating lunch at home, I told them, I said, hey, when we go to the movie theater, just preparing you, we're not buying anything at the concession stand. They're like, what? No, nothing popcorn. I said, y'all have popcorn at home? You can have when you get home if you want popcorn, but we're not buying anything at the concession stand. We have a very strict budget. So to do things that are fun, you have to make some, sacrifices. So to go see the movie, it fit in the budget, but concession stands, money did not fit in the budget. Well, on the way to the movie theater, they're like, hey, so how about we just stop at Dollar Tree, get some snacks, and then we can sneak those into the movie. We're like, no, we're not going to do that because the movie theater has a rule. No outside snacks. So it's not okay to break the rules, right? Well, no, it's not okay to break the rules. And so then their attitude completely shifted. They were upset. They were taking something precious that we had sacrificed for and turning it into something that it shouldn't have been. So we pulled over to the side of the road and we sat there. They're like, what are we sitting here for? Your attitude stinks. Do we need to go home? Well, no. They shifted their attitude. But how many times do we do that to the Lord? God, you gave me something, but I don't really appreciate it like I should. And that's what the son did. He took something precious and turned it into nothing. In verse 14, it says, a severe famine. Verse 15, he hires himself out to a citizen of that country, and the man sends him to feed pigs. And this is why the pig pen is so devastating. We all know in Jewish culture they don't eat pork. So here we have the son on the lowest possible rung. Pigs were unclean animals. A Jewish man feeding pigs is not just broke, he is ceremonially, culturally, spiritually defiled. He has crossed every line. And in verse 16 he says he wanted to eat the pods the pigs were eating. That was the pig feed that was used. He is now putting himself below the animal level. No one gave him anything. Not a party, not his party friends, not his employer, not a stranger, no one. The community he chose over his father had nothing left for him. And I feel like this is an honest testimony for anyone who has ever run hard towards something God told you not to chase. It didn't deliver, and the distance between the promise and the pig pen is a lot closer than you think. It's a lot shorter of a walk. In verse 17 it says, he came to himself and he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. He came to himself. Coming into himself is the language of someone returning to their own self-awareness, where he stopped being driven by impulse and appetite after a long absence, meaning he all of a sudden got his mind right. He became very self-aware of, I've got a problem that I need to deal with. When I've struggled with addiction, to get through addiction, you have to come to that place of saying, I've got a problem. I need to deal with the problem. Got to become self-aware that you're living in a pig pen. Repentance always begins with self-awareness. Not a prayer, not a church service, not an altar call. A moment of soberness that I am in a pig pen. A moment of coming back to your own mind and saying, wait, what have I done? Who have I become? And where did I come from? And that's what happens to the prodigal son. He doesn't have some spiritual experience. He gets hungry enough, meaning he hit his rock bottom hard enough that all of a sudden his mind is thinking clearly. He wakes up. And in that clarity, he remembers his father's house. That's grace. The hunger that makes us remember, the emptiness that finally makes us honest, the pig pen that does what the party cannot do, tells us the truth about where we are. And so he decides, hey, I'm going to get up, I'm going to start walking home, and he starts rehearsing his speech to his father. Now, we don't know how far away he was from his father's house. But y'all had moments like that where you know you're about to have a hard conversation, and so you are going through the conversation you're about to have in your mind, and you're like, well, here's what could happen on A, what might happen, option B, option C, option D, and you've thought about every kind of consequence and circumstance under the sun, right? That could happen. That deserves your choices. And just think about it. He says, Father, I have sinned against heaven, against you. I'm not worthy to be called your son, so can I just live as a servant? He's doing the math. And watch what the Father does with the speech. In verse 20, it says, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. And the son opens his mouth. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. And he never gets to the job application part. He never gets to the begging. He never gets to the moment where he gets on his knees and says, what do I have to do? Do I need to crawl through glass on my hands and knees? Or do I need to walk across hot coals? The Father doesn't let him get that far. He just gives him a kiss. He puts a robe, a ring, and sandals as a symbol of full sonship. And each item the Father calls for carries specific meaning. The best robe, likely the Father's own ceremonial garment, represents restored honor. The robe covers the shame publicly because he does it in front of everyone. The ring is a signet ring representing authority and identity. The Father is restoring the Son's legal standing in the household. And the sandals represent freedom. Slaves always had to go barefooted. The Father is declaring, before the Son has said another word, you are not a servant, you are my son. Grace doesn't wait for you to finish explaining yourself. Let me say that one more time. Grace doesn't wait for you to finish explaining yourself. The initiative of the Father, before the speech is finished, before the apology is complete, before any evidence of change, behavior, the robe is on his shoulders, the ring is on his finger, and the party has started. And that is either the most comforting thing you've heard or the most offensive, because it all depends on which son you are. We've all had moments to where we're the prodigal son. But then there's son number 2, the son that refuses to go to the party, the one that stands on the outside saying, I've been wronged. In verse 28, it says, the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. The older son does have a point. I have been that older son in life. We are very transparent about life. I have a brother that has made lots of horrible decisions. And I'll use this example, when it came to my first car, I had to work hard and I had to buy my first car. My first car was a Geo Metro 5-speed that I paid $1,200 for. But I was proud of that car. I had to pay my own insurance, pay my own gas. I remember the first time I had a flat tire, I had to pay for my tire, a new tire. I had to even change my tire myself. My dad would not do it. He said, you got to do it yourself. But then my brother started driving. My parents purchased his first car for him, brand new from a car lot. Never had to pay for his own gas, never had a job. And I say that not out of animosity. I'm just using an example. My mom will tell you that was the worst decision that she ever, one of the worst decisions she made. So I have felt like the older son. The one that stayed, the one that worked, the one that was faithful when faithfulness wasn't rewarded. There was never a party for the one who left, or for the one who stayed. Fairness. His complaint was legitimate. And so the three things the son says is, he's like, I've been slaving for you. Not being a son, being a slave. Been in the Father's house for years, working the Father's land. And he doesn't call the Father my Father. And he doesn't describe himself as a son. He describes their life as a transaction. This is where the younger son was in a pig pen thinking about the Father's house, and the older son was in the Father's house thinking of it as a pig pen. Perspective. He never left, but he never was really at home. Never embraced his home. Number 2, the son says, this son of yours, he does not call him my brother. Meaning he's already disowned him. He's not standing outside the party because he doesn't know about grace. He's standing outside the party because he has decided that his brother does not deserve to be his brother anymore. Think about that. There's relational distance. It doesn't have to do with geography. It has to do with being judgmental of each other. And this is where Jesus is speaking mostly directly to the Pharisees. They don't have a theology problem. They have a brotherhood problem. They don't want to embrace the sinners and the tax collectors and the shepherds. And the older son was angry that grace was given, that it was not withheld from him. And the father says, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. The older son had access to everything, every resource, every blessing, every inheritance the whole time, but he doesn't enjoy it, not because it wasn't available, because he was too busy trying to keep score. That's a tragedy. He was profoundly loved and couldn't feel it because his system of measuring love was based on merit. And grace will never work on a merit system. And notice both times the father pursues the sons. He goes out for them. He doesn't wait for them to come in. He goes out when he ran to the younger son. He pursues both. He pleads with both. He doesn't let the the son of yours stand. He says, the brother of yours. He corrects it. He insists on brotherhood. This is not by accident. Jesus is handing the ending of the story to every Pharisee in the room. He does not tell whether the son ever goes into the party. He leaves it on a cliffhanger. I always hate when I'm watching shows. Like, we were watching NCIS the other night, and the season finale came on, and it was left as a cliffhanger, and I was like, no! I hate cliffhangers. I want everything to be wrapped up in a nice, tidy box and bow. But Jesus left it. Because he wanted the Pharisees to make a decision. The door is open. Will you go in? Jesus doesn't tell one story. He tells three. Because there are three kinds of people who are lost. The sheep wandered without making a decision. The coin didn't make a choice. It just fell through the cracks, lost by circumstance. The younger son made a full-throttled, eyes-open choice to leave. He was done when he walked out the gate. And then the older son made a choice to stay, but leave emotionally to be present without being home, to serve without receiving, to maintain his righteousness at the cost of his relationships. Jesus draws a circle big enough for all four of those conditions: drifted, fallen through the cracks, ran away, and stood outside. But all four end the same way. If the lost thing is found, we throw a party. Grace is irresistible in its offer. It's not irresistible in its reception. And you have to choose to receive grace. Alicia, you can come. The father who saw his son while he was still a long way off. Which means the father never stopped watching for his son. God has not been keeping his eyes off the road. He's watching you every day of your life. You don't have to have a speech ready. You don't have to be cleaned up. You don't have to understand all your own theology before you take a step towards home. The road goes on before you finish sentence. That's what grace is. You know, this morning, Zach and I were listening. We had worship on in the car on the way here, and I was listening to, we were listening to SEU worship, and the song "A Forgiving God" came on, and this part of the song really got me. It says, "My father ran to me and said, 'Welcome home.' He's never broken a promise because he's calling." Jesus says he wants you. He's a forgiving God. You no longer have to wonder, calling sons and daughters. After all, he is the Father. You never left his heart. He's always thinking of you. He'll come running out to meet you and throw his arms around you because he's a forgiving God. He's been sitting on the porch, awaiting your arrival. You never have left his heart because he's always thinking of you. But that part of he's been sitting on the porch, awaiting your arrival because he's always thinking about you. God is closer than you realize. God has lit the lamp and is sweeping the house. The Father's got you. Jesus told those 3 stories to a crowd of religious people who were angry at him for eating with sinners. He didn't argue with their theology. He didn't produce a credentials list. He told them about sheep on his shoulder, a coin in the lamplight, and a sun coming down the road in the distance, and a celebration that started before any of it made sense. God does not wait for you to find your way home. He comes looking. God's not asking for a polished apology. He does not celebrate grudgingly. So whether you've ran, drifted, fell, or stood outside, will you allow yourself to be found? Will you run? Go ahead. Searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers only what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am.